Hey guys, welcome to our podcast. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Ibi Abdo.
Thank you, Shireen. You were going to give a backstory.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you guys a little backstory of how I met Ibi. I met Ibi about 4 years ago in my clinic. Back then, my husband used to operate out of the clinic after hours and do laser for men, and he was my husband's client. And he was one of the first men that I have ever met to talk so open about sexual abuse. And I remember at the time when I met you, when you were telling me your story, I still hadn't accepted to myself what I had gone through. And I don't know if you remember, I was in that room, you were telling me your story and I kind of teared up and I was fighting back the tears. I'm like, no, don't cry. They're going to know. I don't want them to know that. But yeah, ever since that day, you kind of really opened up a big door for me to talk about it, and seeing a man talk so openly about sexual abuse and seeing you now how far you've come from it, I was like, I have to talk to you. I have to get you on this and share your story with the world, and hopefully people listening to this will be able to learn so much from you, because I believe you have so much to give.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And yes, I vividly remember that day. It was upstairs.
Yeah.
And then we walked downstairs.
Yeah.
And we continued the conversation. We got into religion and a little bit of politics on the side. So yeah, it's my pleasure being here.
Thank you so much for coming, honestly.
No worries.
It means a lot. Obviously, this topic makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And we both come from a Lebanese Muslim background. Growing up, this topic has always been like, oh, don't talk about it. It's rude, it's aib, you're going to bring shame onto the family, tarara. So I think talking about this and, part of breaking the cycle to abuse is to open up and raise awareness around sexual abuse. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just sexual abuse, all forms of abuse. Why don't you share with me your story and
my story? Okay, so in a nutshell, and we can get into a lot more details later, but my sexual abuse, or my experience with sexual abuse, started when I was about 5 years old, and went until about when I was 14. And that was from a family member, so it was my auntie's husband. And my family had no idea about this until I was about 26. So nobody had ever come across my story. A lot of shame, obviously, a lot of regret, a lot of blame kept me in the dark. And so I thought I'd take that secret to my grave. The first person I ever told was a friend when I was about 18 years old, and I think that was by mistake. It was just a very intense moment that I was having. So obviously, because of my abuse, there was a lot of trauma that went on into my family life. So the relationship that I had with my dad was quite unstable. My dad was a really big trigger for me. He said a few things to me. I kind of just went crazy and then called my friend up, had like a meltdown. He came pick me up, and then I just kind of blurted it out. And I remember probably for about 3 months after that, I had this this thing that I was just like, what the hell did I just do? I just told somebody something.
Secret.
Yeah. And so I kind of avoided that person for a while because I didn't know what to do with that, didn't know how to handle the situation. He didn't either, to be honest. It was really awkward. But it got better. But I decided that he would be the only person that I would ever tell. And then I think when I got married, or when I was getting to know my ex-wife at the time, she had similar instances, without revealing too much about her. And I thought that sharing it with her might help her make her feel better. I shared it with her, and then I guess about a year after that is when I disclosed to my family.
Wow.
Yeah, because I found out that there was a few other people within my family that had similar experiences.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay.
How did you find that out?
By complete accident. Yeah, how exactly I found out is I was talking to a friend about 24 and onwards is when I started talking about this stuff quite openly on Facebook. I guess because I worked in community services stuff, No one really ever thought it was about me, but it was. So all my posts were always about me. But I think most people just assumed it's because of the work that I do.
Or you're a man. People
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
expect
And no,
this to happen to a
never.
man.
And then I think around 25, 26 is when I kind of owned the story, but in an indirect way. And some people started to catch on that that's actually my story. So I started to get a few messages and I was like, shit, like people are not only responding well, but they're also engaging and asking questions because they've had similar experiences. And predominantly there were males that were responding.
Wow.
So that kind of gave me a little bit more courage to start owning the whole narrative around my abuse. And I got quite comfortable with it. I just still didn't want to share it with my family because I didn't think that they could.
You probably didn't want to hurt them.
Yeah, honestly, that was probably the second biggest thing for me about not talking is that what's it going to do to my family? It's going to destroy them. Because at that stage, I guess I'd been seeing psychs for about 7 or 8 years and I could see what the trauma had done to my own personal life. And I was like, my parents would probably die if I was to disclose this kind of information to them. So I was just like, no, I'm not doing that because I'm not going to put them through something that happened X amount of years ago. The only reason I spoke up was because, like I said, I found out about a few other people within my family and I was like, fuck.
And did they open up about it? Like, were they happy sharing that?
I think they shared that just because I shared.
So it was you who originally...
Yeah. And
it takes that one person to have that courage.
Yeah. And then it's like just like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Because it was just one person after the other saying, okay, hey, I've had a similar experience. And in my particular case, the reason why I disclosed was because I wanted to go to the police.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I work in this industry and I know that this is never just a one-off incident. I know that it doesn't stop with one person.
Especially if there's a predator in the family, it's usually through all the children of the family.
Yeah. And so I was just like, I know this. I know all of this information, but I chose to ignore those parts because I didn't want to feel bad about not disclosing. And so I told my parents, we told my aunties. And
how did they handle it when you first told them?
Oh, fuck. It was exactly as I expected it to be. The family blew up. Everybody went crazy.
Did you get any backlash?
I did. So I got backlash from the people that I expected to get backlash from, which was his immediate family. And I guess before I disclosed, I kind of wrote out like a plan about how things would go so that I could understand what the process could potentially look like.
So you prepped yourself?
I did. Yeah. I had to because I was like, nobody is going to do any damage control. And I've worked in this space for a while and I've been that person for other people. Now I just need to do it for myself. So I told my parents, I told my aunties, and I knew that his kids would be so overwhelmed.
Has he gone near his own kids?
Has he gone near his own kids? There was talk about that stuff. I didn't explore it any further beyond that because it wasn't about that at the time. But what had happened was his wife, which is my auntie, I mean, if he was doing this to people, to kids, I can only imagine what he was doing to her in terms of, do you know what I mean? So I know that she's had her fair share of shitty experiences in life. And so my heart and soul was with her and her kids more than it was with my own family's reaction.
She was married to a monster.
Yeah. And for my cousins, you know, his children, to be able to make sense of their father doing these kinds of things, like I couldn't, that was not something I could fathom.
Yeah.
And so it was about putting my ego aside and just whatever happens, happens. And, you know, my auntie asked me to stop everything. She's like, please, he's changed. And I was like, I just need to let her say whatever it is that she wants to say.
She probably couldn't make terms with it at that time either.
No, she couldn't.
No, she couldn't make proper decisions.
You know, and his kids were hot cold. So, you know, the eldest kid was, you know, sometimes going crazy at me. You're ruining my family. my mum's going to kill herself and all these things. And I was just like, fuck, like
It's
what
not
am
me
I?
ruining your
That,
family, mate. It's your dad.
And I had to remind myself every single day that this is not on me.
No.
But I couldn't respond to her like that because I knew she just had all this anger
She just needs to let it
and she
out.
didn't know what to do with it. And because I was an angry person for a very long time, it was misplaced. I was like, I just need to give her that outlet, let her say what she wants to say, because the ultimate goal is we will be a family again. It's just going to look very different to how it was.
Totally.
So I went to the cops. That took about 7 months of building this report and detail after detail and detail.
Going through that is...
And it was absolutely disgusting to have to relive. And like, you know, I've always watched shows and heard stories about people reliving, like, you know, their traumas and their abuse. And I never kind of could relate to it because I hadn't ever gone through it. But when I was going to that police station almost every single day for like 6 months,
wow,
I was like, this is fucked. Like this is actually fucked. And so they were really big and pushy on, we need to get him. You need to wear a wire. You need to go and see him. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to do that?
I do not want to see him.
I
I'll be
can't
far
put
away
my-
from
yeah,
him.
I can't
That's
do
the last
that.
person I want to see.
And they're like, no, that, you know, that'll be solid evidence for us. And then subhanallah, the best thing I think that ever happened was he took off and went overseas.
Wow. And
Yeah.
he never came back.
And I don't think he can come back.
Wow.
Because if he does, there's going to be
Yeah.
somebody waiting. Yeah, because at the time they hadn't alerted whoever it is, the authorities.
The authorities.
Yeah, so it was beyond the police. Nobody else knew. So he just took off. And for me personally, I see that as the best thing that could have ever happened because
Did you find closure?
You know, when I initially told my parents, I thought that would help me. It did and it didn't. It did in the sense of the secret finally came out.
They can understand.
And my parents
why.
finally, I got this understanding and connection from them that I craved my entire life.
Right.
Like all of my behaviors that were labeled as shitty and disgusting and retarded and all these other words that you otherwise wouldn't use had you known it was abuse. They finally understood why I was the way that I was. And I think it was more so from my dad, because my dad and I had this really toxic relationship where it was always fighting, always screaming, always hitting, always throwing things at each other, always abusive, because of the abuse. So that severed my relationship with men in general, because I thought men just hurt people. And then, you know, my dad being the Arab and growing up in the way that he grew up kind of, you know, wants to discipline me the way that his father disciplined me. And so I just thought that was just, you know, the abuse.
It's like you're copying abuse on top of abuse on top of abuse.
And so when my dad found out, that was phenomenal for me, because I felt like that really helped us bridge the connection.
How did he, like, in that moment when you spoke to your dad about it, what was his response to you?
So when I actually told my dad what happened, well, I can actually see it, like as if it's like a video in my head. He just sat there for a few seconds, and I just asked him, like, Dad, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And he's like, yeah, I do. And then he started...
Did he have a feeling?
He didn't have a feeling. He was like smiling, which was kind of scary, because I was like, that's not the...
That's not what I expected of you, mate.
No. But I think he was in shock, because what happened was he said he was going to pick up my little sister from school. And I told him, I'm like, Dad, are you sure we can get somebody else to pick her up? Stay home, relax, it's fine. He's like, no, I really just need to go outside, and then I'll come back in 10 minutes. And when he came back in 5 minutes later. So I don't think he ended up picking up my sister. He came back in like 5 minutes later, and that's when he lost his shit. He's like, I'm going to fucking kill him. That kalb, we trusted him. And he just went on and on and on. And it was like heartbreaking, because half an hour before that, I had just told my mum, and my mum fell apart. And then when I told her, I'm like, should I tell Dad? And she's like, if you're going to the police, I think you should. And I was like, okay, you need to get your shit together, because if Dad comes in and sees you crying, then he's going to definitely know what's up, and it's not going to go according to plan. So my mum watched her face.
Your mum.
My mum, I don't even want to talk about what happened with my mum, but she, like, well, she got on her knees and asked me for forgiveness. And that's the thing, like, that was the moment that I wanted to avoid, was having my mum think that it was her fault, because it's not. It's not her fault. It's not my dad's fault. It's not my brother's fault. It's not my sister's fault. It's not anybody's fault. It was one person's decision to do this.
Yeah.
And that person has affected so many people's lives forever, just because you can't control yourself, because you made the wrong decision.
Acting on your impulse.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about him. And I go through my moments where I'm like, yeah, I forgive him. He's sick, whatever. And then I go through other moments where I'm like, fuck you. You're a fuckwit. You deserve everything you get in life. So I go through those two extremes, but then I can always remember my mum and my dad's reactions. Like, those are two things that I just cannot get out of my head. And I'm okay with that because that was their reaction. But I know that my parents will never be able to come back from that, because they're very traditional, set in their ways. They don't believe in therapy. They don't believe in talking. So they've just accepted the fact that it's
brush
their
it
fault,
under the carpet,
and we just move on with life. But I think with time, they were getting a lot of their emotional support from seeing that I was okay, because I actually was. Like,
I mean, you're doing great for yourself.
Yeah, that period of my life was re-traumatizing, not because of my abuse, but seeing how other people were reacting to the news of what had happened to me. So beyond that, I was actually okay. I accepted all of what had happened.
It becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And
maybe had you not gone through that, your whole work wouldn't be around what you do now.
My whole life, yeah, absolutely.
How many people have you helped?
Yeah. And how many people have helped me? Like, you know, this is helping me too. And like, it's not ever one-sided. Like, that whole help thing is always, you know, everyone's helping everyone. Everyone's learning from everyone. And I absolutely don't regret going through what I went through.
Yeah.
I don't regret the abuse. It happened. I can't change it. I have no control over it. I've accepted it for what it is. And it's everything that has happened after that has made me who I am today. And I absolutely love who I am today. So no regrets.
Going back to a child at 5, what was going through your head at that age when it first happened? And like, people don't really understand. Some people like this. There's sexual abuse, there's rape, and then there's oh my God, it's not the time to go blank, Shireen. There's assault. Yeah. So assault is when you're touched physically inappropriately, and then there's your full-blown rape, and that's the full sexual.
Yep.
Where people make you do acts on them and they do acts to you.
Yep.
What happened to you?
For me, it was the entire experience. So it was penetrative, if that's the word.
Yeah.
Penetrative.
Yeah.
And oral and all of it. So all of it.
The first time he ever came to you?
I actually can't remember the first time that it happened. So that was something that was kind of difficult for me to remember. I just remember things by, like, my mum's got like photo albums, and I remember seeing those photos and remembering events happening around that photo. So like, an example is we went to Port Macquarie when we were young, and I remember it happening at Port Macquarie. I didn't know how old I was until I looked at the photo and I saw it was like in 1995 or 1994. Wow. And so that's how I kind of created the timeline. I don't remember the first time it happening. I just remember it being normal. So when the police were asking, and a lot of people asked me, like, you know, when was it, like, when was the first time that it happened? I'm like, I actually don't know. I just remember at Port Macquarie. Yeah, like Port Macquarie became like the reference point for me, because I was 5 there and I already thought it was normal. So him asking me to come with him to go to the toilet or to go for a walk or whatever was actually normal for me. And I would just go.
Your parents then, they just thought that was normal?
Yeah.
Well, usually when there's a predator in the family, they build a very good relationship with the parents.
Yeah, I mean, we know, I don't know really know what the percent is, but most of the time it's always like somebody that the family knows and trusts. Yeah, because it's a
Yeah.
misuse of like authority, that trust that gains them access to kids.
So now, like, for parents listening to this,
Mm-hmm.
what are the things that they could do to prevent things like this happening? Like, what is it, things that you could say to your children to...
I would say the first thing is take a really deep breath, because what tends to happen, or what I see happening, is that parents then become helicopter parents. So they hover over their children and they don't give them the space to feel or think or cry.
I think I'm falling into
or
that.
get hurt. And I don't know what that's like because I'm not a parent. But I can tell you what we shouldn't be doing is, things like my mum, for example, doesn't let my little sisters do any sleepovers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's an individual choice, right? But I don't think it should be because of the fear that this will happen, right? So we can't start behaving or living life because you fear that abuse or something might happen, because you don't have control over those things, and you can't be living your life to avoid those things. If you don't want to have your child sleeping at somebody's house, that is perfectly fine, because that is your choice. But it can't be because of our own experiences or the fear of our children experiencing something like that. Because the fact of life is that shit is going to happen. I mean, my mum was so strict on us when we were young. So we only ever slept at one person's house, which was my uncle, like from my dad's side of the family. And that's because he had 3 boys. And I think we slept there like twice or 3 times. We weren't allowed to go away on school camps until like year 9, year 10.
Wow.
Friends weren't allowed over. My mum was really strict with us, and this still happened. So you can be strict and you can protect your child, and this will still happen, because it's not something that consciously
what
think
are the
of.
signs that you see in a child
Yeah, that can
that indicate this is happening? And what are the signs in a predator that you
It's a really difficult question to answer, because I mean, if you're going to look at children's behavior, like it's not a one size fits all. Behavior fits on a spectrum. Some kids will act out and some kids won't. Some kids will just keep quiet and say absolutely nothing. Which is another form of acting out anyway. But it's really hard to pinpoint behaviors. I think one of the questions that we should be asking is, how can we make our kids feel safe enough to talk to us about these things? And that is nurturing their emotional capacity to understand things and speak to you, and have an open and honest relationship with your kids where if something does happen, they can come and talk to you.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? By not shutting down those avenues. So like, if your child is crying, or your child is having a tantrum, or he's having a moment, or she's having a moment, when you say things like stop crying, or stop shouting, or stop screaming, or stop whatever it is, you're also sending messages to this child that you are not a safe person. A lot of us, especially in our community, grow up not recognizing how unsafe our parents are to us. We don't talk to them about any of our emotions. So why would I ever talk to you about my abuse? Do you know what I mean? So for you as a parent, I think some of the questions that you can ask yourself is, if my child gets in trouble at school, are they going to hide the truth from me? Or are they going to tell me what actually happened? Like, these are just some reflective questions to ask yourself.
Me personally, they'll tell me.
Yeah. So if you've got that relationship, then they're more likely to want to talk to you about something that's gone wrong for them. When you talk to your children about their private parts, name their private parts.
Name the private parts.
Don't call them these cute little names like Ashosh and whatever. Like, call them what they are.
Yeah.
And tell them who is allowed to touch these parts and who isn't. Talk to them about what it means to be safe in their own clothes, like all of these things.
Is it bad to like tell children, these things happen? Because I've explained everything to my kids.
Look,
I'm like,
I guess
Mum, no one's allowed to touch your vagina.
Yeah.
I'm the only one who's allowed to see it.
Yeah. No, that's completely
There's
okay.
people
That's
in the world that come
okay.
onto you. And then my child's like, whoa.
Because if there's a sense of normalcy around what their parts are, what they're called, and who's allowed to see them and who's not, and what happens if someone does see it or touch it or go near it or whatever, then they will talk about it as if it's normal. But if there's never any conversation around these things, then your child is not going to want to talk about what's happened because they're going to think it's wrong.
But as well, you can't only have conversations with your kids around this. Like me personally, because I am a mother and I have children, I've been talking to my kids from their babies.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of also build that relationship with your kids from when they're babies. Even like my oldest daughter is 7 years old, and she will have a full blown outcome. Like she can't keep anything in. But I'm like that even with my middle child. But yeah, I feel like had I not spoken to my kids when they were babies, when they were really young, and to kind of build it, something else when they come home from school, baby, how was your day at school? What did you do today? Like, find out everything that happened in the day, get them used to sharing their experiences and talking. And where sometimes I feel like people will be like, oh, that's just a child, what does the kid know? But kids know everything. They're on the ball. They know everything that's going on, and they monitor us, and they're watching everything in our environment.
Absolutely.
So I think building that relationship with your kids, even before you kind of talk to your kids about sexual abuse.
100%. That is not the starting point.
That's not the starting point.
No.
It's like you can't be completely quiet. Go to your room or come here.
Yeah,
no one's allowed to touch your vagina.
And I think what we're talking about is building their resilience. So building their emotional literacy, helping them, giving them the language to talk about their life the way that they're experiencing it. And we don't do this enough. No. We assume that when a child starts to talk, that's just like this thing that's happening. No, children pick up words that are modeled to them that they've heard. So if our parents have very limited emotional literacy, then I'm also going to have very limited emotional literacy. And what I mean by emotional literacy is the words that we use to describe our experiences, how we feel, beyond I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm angry, I'm whatever. That's not emotional literacy, that's just basic emotions. We want to talk about describing how those emotions make us feel. Are we feeling sick? Are we feeling anxious? When we feel anxious, what does that make us feel? Or what does that make us do? And none of that is modeled to us. So building children's resilience is giving them the capacity to talk about these things. They need language to talk. So we need to model that language, not just with them, but with your partners. So your husband, your wife, your mum, your dad, because children see and learn through play and modeled behavior. So, the idea of monkey see, monkey do is exactly, what you do with your partner or your important people in your life, your child or your children are going to do the same thing.
I can vouch for that. For a period of time, me and my husband, we lived our life in a way where mine and yours, and it was never ours.
Yep.
And then I started to see that through my two girls. So she always had her own things, and the other one had her own set of things. And it's like, this is for me, that's for you.
Yep.
Don't cross my line, and I won't cross yours. And that's not right. It's right, amongst other people, but when it's between intimate family.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm the way I am is because of my experiences of what I've gone through, and my husband's gone through he's also gone through experiences in his life.
Yep.
So we're kind of brought up in a way where don't ever trust a man, and he's brought up in a way don't ever trust a woman. So I'm constantly have this wall up trying to cover my ass, and the same thing with him. But our kids see that, and they follow through with that. And now we're learning, okay, they really need to see us working together as a team, and that we're one. So they see each other as one. Because the last thing I want is for my kids to, grow and have this whole mind,
Yeah. On that note, if we were to, as we were talking upstairs earlier about the idea of sexual abuse fitting into the whole umbrella of trauma. And I love talking about trauma because I think it's important, and people tend to be quite traumaphobic. Like they're scared of trauma. They're scared of things going wrong. And I think that's a really complicated mentality to have, because life
you're
is
constantly
traumatic,
living
right? It's like life happens and shit happens, and when you have that idea of being traumaphobic or being scared of being hurt, then you're going to get hurt a lot more.
You are.
And when we talk about trauma, it's so important to expand it. It's beyond abuse and neglect and domestic violence and the big T. So the big traumas, those are the big traumas. But we also have the little traumas, like, the emotionally unavailable parents. I didn't get enough love from my dad or my mum. We all got daddy. I used to have mad daddy issues. I still have mad daddy issues because I had an emotionally unavailable father. and those are just as traumatic.
Yeah, they are.
And so everybody goes through those things. We all have
Every
trauma.
human.
Yeah,
Every single
person
human has their
carries
own
some kind of trauma.
trauma.
And so it's important that we start talking about this more, because the more that you talk about it, the less you view it as this evil, poison, toxic thing that ruins people's lives. It's actually just life. Like
But life happens for you, not at you.
Yeah.
So even through your trauma,
Yeah.
like you changed your whole life around. You could have, been a drug addict.
100%.
On the
And I
road,
think
blaming,
I always ask myself, how come, like, again, because I've worked with so many people that have had similar experiences and other experiences, any kind of trauma always creates like two kinds of lives. You're either going to be this person, or you're either going to be that person, or like a whole other variety of persons. How come I turned out the way that I did? Like, yeah, okay, I experimented with drugs, and I was a little bit promiscuous, and I got divorced, and all these other things happened, but I wasn't homeless. I got kicked out of the house, but that was kind of just that whole Arab thing. You get kicked out a few hours and you come back home.
Even if you reach that point, like, who's to say, like, someone who has a bad drug addiction or, became homeless or whatever, but even if you reach that point and you still come out of that, that's what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And so it's like, I used to ask why these things happened and other things didn't. And it's like, well, that's life. That's, if we want to draw it back to, our religion, is that we know that adversity is not avoidable, and God will not test you with something that you can't handle. And I truly believe that. I believe that everything that happens to people happens to them because they are capable of getting out of it. Only they are.
Yeah.
When I hear about other people's experiences with sexual abuse, sometimes the stories are so horrific, and I'm just like, how could you still be alive? Like, how are you still surviving? But it's because only that person could bear that burden.
Well, the thing is, like, whenever you see someone who is strong, people only see their outside strength to them.
Yeah.
But they don't know what that person has gone through
To get
made
there.
them strong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, resilience doesn't just happen. Oh, I'm going to be
Absolutely
resilient
not.
today.
Like, if you were speaking to me, I'm 31 now. So if you were speaking to me when I was like 18, 17, 16 in my teenage years, I am absolutely not that person who I was.
Yeah.
Because resilience, I had no resilience when I was younger. I was like a chameleon. So I just like wore different faces depending on the situations. I could read rooms very easily. I always understood people's emotions, but I had no resilience myself. It was only in my 20s that when I started seeing psychologists, and I had my own coaching sessions and reading a lot of books and Googling my symptoms and all these things, that I started consciously working on my resilience, building up my own capacity.
So start working on your brain.
Yeah, because I had Crohn's, so it's an autoimmune disease, and I think that kind of triggered a very different journey for me, because I was put on a whole bunch of medication. I was just like, and the doctor literally said, you stop taking this, your Crohn's comes back. And I was like, how can you live for the rest of your life taking medication that only stops your Crohn's? Like, that stops the disease. Like, that doesn't kind of make sense to me. And so I started looking into a lot of alternative therapies and looking online and starting to read other things that doctors don't generally talk about. And I found that the relationship between your gut and your brain and all this stuff, and how toxic stress and trauma impacts your gut.
Oh, yeah.
And when your gut is not happy, autoimmune disease.
It all starts from the gut.
Yeah. And I was just like, shit, that's me. I have Crohn's. And so when I started working on stress management and understanding my trauma and integrating my life and living more consciously, I actually started to realize that there was a really big impact on how I felt emotionally, physically, spiritually.
Wow. My
Crohn's started to settle down. And then I stopped taking the medication when I was 24, and it's been what's 24 minus 31? Is that 7? I haven't taken any kind of medication in about 7 years.
Wow. And it's gone.
I've had 2 flare-ups that lasted about a month or 2.
Were you going through stress when... Wow.
So it was around the period when I got divorced, and Another time when I can't remember what was happening, but yeah, it was where I kind of lost that consciousness that I had around my self-care regime.
It's hard to keep it up.
Yeah,
it's
it
hard
is.
To, like,
It is.
I feel like I go through waves. Like,
Yeah.
I'll be like on this high, life, motivation. I'm gonna get up one of this, whatever, and then I go back down into, because we are our biggest enemies. Our inner thought and the way we talk to ourselves and the way we see ourselves, and like sometimes I relive things in my head over and over again, and like, oh, you're going to be this and you're going to fail all your kids, blah, 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 blah. And then I go into my own shell and then I snap back out of it. And that's life, I guess. You got to go up and down. But being conscious of it.
I think most of us always think that is life. It is ups and downs. And it is. But I think what I asked myself is, why does it have to be up and down?
Why can't it just be?
Why can't it be something else? And there's this chick that I follow on, there's a few of them actually, but one of the main ones that and she's my psychologist at the moment, the Holistic Psychologist.
The Holistic Psychologist, no.
So look her up on Instagram. So it's the.holistic.psychologist. And she has been phenomenal in helping me heal and just live life on a much better term, which is my terms, not my thoughts terms. And so she has this concept. I don't know. It's so
Dr.
interesting.
Dr.
Nicole, yeah, Lepera. That's her. She's absolutely amazing. And so one of the things that she talks about a lot is, your thoughts are just thoughts. We assign meaning to them. And so for me, that whole life going up and down thing was kind of like, that was me. I would go through really good periods and go really shit periods and really good periods and really shit periods. Sometimes I get stuck in that really low for like 8 months. Then now, like if I'm talking about how I live my life now, it's that whenever I get thoughts about feeling like shit or not being the best person or not being the best friend or not being the best son or not being the best whatever, I just acknowledge that is a thought and I don't have to make it mean anything. Right? Because that's what we're used to. But
isn't it sometimes when you have those thoughts, maybe it's a little bit good to have them so you can kind of hold yourself accountable?
I mean, no, accountability is completely different because like if I get a thought about being a shit person, that's just a thought. I mean, we get thousands of thoughts a day.
Yeah.
But the only ones that we hold on to are the ones that are emotionally charged. So if I'm feeling really shit right now and I get a thought about, my mum, and how the other day she was talking to me and I raised my voice, I'm going to feel really shit about that just based on how I feel now. But I've assigned meaning to it. But if I was feeling really happy, I probably wouldn't even think about it.
That.
Or if I thought about it, I'd be like, yeah, it's all right. I'll go and apologize to her. Like, so
there's always room for making things better.
And so it's when you get thoughts, they don't have to mean things. And I think that's really relatable for people who have anxiety because
I have anxiety.
we all have anxiety. Because your thoughts become like the ruler of your life.
Yeah.
And you become a slave to your thoughts instead of you being able to control them. And sometimes you can't control your thoughts. I mean, the idea of controlling something that is coming from external, I mean, I can control what I'm thinking about internally, but then there's all these things that are externally stimulating me, like these green plants in front of me, make me feel like I'm at Hyams Beach, for example. Like I didn't purposely think of that. That was just something that came to me because it's right in front of me.
In front of you.
Do you know what I mean? So you can't control your thoughts, but you can definitely control what they mean. And they don't have to mean anything if you don't want them to. But we want to because your brain, the job of your brain is to make sense of everything in life. It's literally what it's created to do. It's the mean-making machine. Oh. And we are programmed in our life to always use our brain. I mean, school is where it starts. It's all about thinking. It's about using your brain. There's no space for heart. There's no space for gut. There's no space for feelings. It's just about thinking. And so when we grow up and we're stuck in this idea that the brain is in charge, then when your thoughts come along, it needs to make sense of it. But sometimes, or actually a lot of the times, your thoughts are not logical. They don't make sense. And your brain can't make sense of it. And what happens is you go crazy. And you just get stuck in this loop of going round and round and round. And I think the breaking point is just recognizing that, one, you don't have control over what you get to think about. but you do get to control
how it affects you.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's moving into that idea of empowering people and helping them understand that they have choice and they're not helpless and hopeless, and you know, they're not these victims, because I mean, we become victims of our own thoughts. You know, it's always somebody else's fault. Why is this happening to me? What did I do? Poor me.
Had I not gone through this, I would have been this. And
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. That's why you're not a victim, and you're not a survivor. You're a warrior. Like,
that's it. Like those words, I think they can be empowering or very dangerous, and I think language just in itself can always be the double-edged sword. Like words are so powerful, and words like victim have really negative lasting impacts on victims, because what it does is it assigns a meaning and a label to you beyond your abuse, that when something happens in your life, you're the victim of that situation, but you are not, because victimhood strips you of being empowered.
Strips you of everything.
Yeah. It just keeps you in that little hole. And I mean, even survivor, like I remember when I first heard that word, I was just like, I don't know if I want to be called a survivor. Like, not really. I don't feel like I'm surviving. I feel like I'm living. I feel like I'm thriving. There are so many other words that I could use, warrior. But yeah, definitely not survivor or victim, because they are very self-limiting words.
You know, again, life happens for you, not at you. And I think, you know, how you said before, it's either when you go through trauma, you come out this way or you come out that way. I think the way you see yourself has a lot to do with, and if you do see yourself as a victim, you're going to blame everything that happens in your life on that trauma you went through.
Yeah.
So not alone did that traumatize you at that stage in your life, but it's also traumatizing you for the rest of your life when you see yourself that way. And if I had seen myself as a victim and, you know, you did this to me and blah, 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 you know, go on the drugs, ruin my whole life, at the end, that scenario of what I've gone through is just going to constantly keep hurting.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask, you know, why are you so strong, and, you know, how did you turn your life around and whatever. And it takes a lot.
Yeah.
You don't just
still doing the work.
Still going,
yeah,
still trying, still battling.
People always say that. That's such a good, like, thank you for saying that, because it's literally everything. Every day I get asked a question like, oh, when do I get to a stage where I'm happy, or like when does it finish, or when can I be like you? And I'm just like, bro, like that is not how you don't see the work. Like the work is ongoing. It does not stop.
No.
Like, okay, it's not so much my therapy and all the development that I do for myself is not so much focused on my trauma, because my life is not just about my trauma. No. For a very long time, it was centered around my trauma, because I fell into that trap around that my whole life was based around my abuse. But I didn't see that my abuse was just one part of your life. Of my life.
But every year you grow.
Yeah.
That's another year of, you know, learning new things and new traumas happening and and knowing how to deal with it. Like,
yeah. And so now it's all about like just being mindful every single day. Like it's not so much about my abuse anymore. Like every maybe once a blue moon, it might pop up. But beyond that aspect of my life is done and dusted. And I think that's how it should be for everyone. Like you always have those feelings, and you know you have some of those triggers might pop up every now and then around your trauma, the actual trauma point. But your life and anything that you ever want to do shouldn't be centered around that. That shouldn't be the reference point for you. Yeah. And I think that's a trap that we often fall into, is that everything in life is then based off this event or this thing that happened in my life. Like for me, I was promiscuous, and my behavior was shit, and I was a shitty Muslim, and I was a shit son, and it was all these things because of my trauma. Well, yeah, at the beginning, that's how the narrative or the story was starting to form itself. But I think in hindsight, I wish I had somebody who could have kind of came in and said, well, no, some of this is actually just life. Not everything is your trauma. Not everything is that reference point that you built up, because it was a reference point for a very long time. Now I try not to have a reference point, because I feel like it, you know, like you said, every year you're growing, you're growing. And if I have a reference point that is like 20 something years old, I'm not really growing much.
No.
So I try not to have like a baseline. I always try to just do better every day. I have those goals that are, I set in the future, and I try to achieve them. But I try not to create reference points that are in the past.
Yeah. How, like, what, for someone who's listening to this and, they still haven't opened up, because a lot of people haven't opened up about what they've gone through.
Yep.
What are the first steps a person should do to heal from?
I'm always big on people speaking to professionals. I think that is one of the most important things that you can do, especially if you have not yet disclosed your abuse or any kind of trauma in your life. It's about recognizing who is safe in your life, and a lot of us don't have access to safe people. And what I mean by safe people is, if I tell you that something has happened in my life, you are going to hold that space for me where I'm allowed to feel whatever the fuck I want to feel. So if I want to tell you something and be angry while I'm telling you, you don't take it personally. You just listen and you hold that space for me. And we don't have a lot of those people around us. So that's why I usually give people the advice of seeking out a professional that can hold that space for you. And that will be 100% confidential, that, you never have to worry about it leaving them. But if you're somebody that's not ready to talk about those things, there is so much that you can do for yourself. Like I said, there's a lot of people that have helped me online that I've never met before. You just need to be, I guess, open to the idea of wanting to be better and wanting to live a better life because you deserve it. For me, what helped me a lot, like, these are like the 3 things that I do every day. And the one thing that I've been doing ever since I started talking about my trauma was journaling. So writing down how I feel, writing doting about my days, writing down about how shit I felt. Because when you don't give yourself an outlet for these things to leave you, then what it does is it just creates more and more and more and more shit for you.
And being a man, an Arab man, like, boys are raised in a way, you should be strong, you shouldn't cry, suck it up, you need to, like, my son is 9 months old, and I remember my husband goes to me not long ago, stop, you're mothering him, you're making him nana. And I'm like, please, I have no problem my son being, he is allowed to cry. And it's like, if a baby, he's still a baby, and we already have this judgment in our head, because he's a boy, he's not allowed to cry. He's not allowed to share. He's like, so for mothers and fathers of boys listening to this, what would you advise?
Oh, God. I'll share a little bit about my own experiences as a boy and a man growing up in a very traditional Arab household. It was fucking hard, especially given the context of my life. I have a lot of emotions. I was always expressing them. So my grandmother, Allah yarhamha, was very nurturing of my emotions. She taught me everything I know about love. And she used to shower me with love. She would spoil me, as my dad would call it. I just call it nurturing. She was a very, very nurturing figure in my life.
What month was she born in?
My grandmother? I think May.
May. Aries.
And so for me, because of her, I always felt very safe to express how I felt. When I was with her. When I was at home was a very different story, because my dad would, and not consciously, but my dad would shame me back into being a man, or that toxic idea of what it was about being a man. You don't talk too much, you don't laugh too much, you don't cry. If you talk too much, you're a girl. If you cry too much, you're a girl. He would force me to work with him, because my dad was, handyman, construction stuff, and I hated it. I hated it for a lot of reasons. One of it was trauma-based, but the others is I just didn't enjoy that shit. I loved reading. I loved writing.
You're a brains type of man.
Yeah. And all of that was meant to be okay, but it wasn't. And I had an older brother who was, who fit that masculine idea for my father. And so I saw that relationship that they had, and I was just like, shit, I am not that. Like, I don't have that with my dad. That means I'm less than a male. And I grew up thinking that I had, at one stage I thought I was gay because I was like, I've got all these emotions and I cry and I have feelings and I like hugging and I'm affectionate. And my dad has showed me that that's not what a man does. So therefore it means I'm gay. and so for a while, like it really did fuck with my head because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with, that's all I knew. And I knew that I was very emotional and I was very attached and I was very energetic and I was very everything that I shouldn't be. So the only logical, again, because I use my brain, the brain trying to make sense of it, the only logical answer to the question or to why I was like that was because I was gay. Which makes absolutely no fucking sense when you think about it. But that is what I grew up thinking because of the experiences that I had being a male in a very patriarchal family. So my advice to mums and dads for boys is just recognize like how much you limit your boy or your son in his emotional capacity, in every capacity, compared to a girl. So I've got, my cousin's got a daughter and she loves getting dressed up as the Hulk, and Spider-Man, and getting her face painted as the Hulk and dressing up as the Hulk, and she's obsessed with the Hulk. And all of that is okay because it's cute, right? And so I asked my cousin, I was like, what about if your son wants to get dressed up as a fairy and wear a dress and get painted in pink? And he's like, what the fuck? And I was like, why?
Why do you even have that conversation with me?
I was like, why that standard? Why is your daughter allowed to and why is your son not? And I think women have made massive leaps in terms of undoing a lot of that shit. And men have just stagnated and just stayed the same.
They just don't know.
Yeah.
There's no education
there's
for men.
no change because we're scared of change. There's nothing that's different. Everything is exactly the same. And I was like, but your daughter gets dressed up in like boys' clothes and she gets her face painted like the Hulk and there's no question about it. You take photos. It's so cute. Look at her. She's such a tomboy. Even though we shouldn't be using those words, she's just being a girl. But if your son wants to do any of that, no way.
No way.
No way.
Hell no.
Yeah, his face went like, what the fuck? How can you even ask me that question?
Like, you're insulting me. You're talking to me about this.
And I think we just all need to get comfortable with understanding that none of those things define your child.
No.
Like,
it's just a way of expression.
Yeah.
And kids are allowed to express themselves.
If someone likes pink, they can like pink.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that your son is going to be gay. It is not a gay color. There is no such thing as a gay color. Like I was wearing, one of my friends had a perfume and I loved it. I'm like, what's it called? And she's like, oh, YSL something. And I was like, I absolutely love it. I'm going to buy it. She's like, you're going to buy girls' perfume? I was like, yeah.
It smells nice.
And then she's like, but it's for girls. I was like, I'm sorry, did they get a girl and squeeze her and take the oil and put it in there? Because last I checked, all that shit is just marketing. Like, it's perfume.
True,
perfume is perfume. It's just marketed to different genders.
But when a woman wears men's perfume, that's hard.
Yeah. You see what I mean? Like, sexy. I can't wear females' perfume because that would make me gay.
So, thank you so much for having this chat with me. And I do apologize to the people listening to this if you guys do get a little bit offended, but this is our opinion. This is our point of view. And the way we think, there's a lot of people out there who also feel the same way that we feel. If you don't agree with what we have to say, that's fine. I don't want to hear it. You can keep your comments to yourself. You just simply don't listen, unfollow, unsubscribe, whatever it is that you want to do. For the people who do like listening to this and you can relate, and, you know, it does touch, you know, a place in your heart, I'm happy, and, you know, this is for you. There is a way out. There are a lot of things that you can do in your life to get out of what it is that you have gone through. It all comes down to self-education, seeing professionals, reading. You know, we have the world in our hands. You know, back in our parents' days, it was harder for them to educate themselves because they literally didn't have a phone. Like, things were hard. They just had no idea. But now there are a lot of things. You can access information very easily, so no excuses.
If I can also just add, somewhere maybe at the beginning of the podcast, if you want to just put that like a trigger warning, to let everybody know that it is quite sensitive, some of the topics, so that they're aware of what's happening for them. And then also for anybody that does want to do something about their life and actually make the changes. If you are seeking that professional help, then the first step is to go to your local GP. If that local GP is a family friend that you don't feel comfortable going to, find any find any GP. And what you'd need to do is ask them for a mental health plan.
But listen, I've seen a lot of people who go see psychologists and the psychologist is shit.
Yeah, because like any profession, you're going to have people that are really good at their job and really shit at their job.
So if you have seen a psychologist and shit, don't get turned off.
It's
just a shit psychologist. See someone else.
Do your research. You want to, if before you go to the doctor, do your research. You can just Google particular types of therapy or
Google law of attraction. Google positive thinking.
Well, they're self-help stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm saying in regards to if you want to see an actual psychologist, he or she needs to specialize in trauma and have some sort of experience around something that you've gone through. So whether that's domestic violence or physical abuse, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, if Google them, you will find that they've got a profile. If you're happy with them and you see that you might relate to some of what they've written, all you do is you take that name, you go to your doctor, you ask for a mental health plan. They will ask you a series of questions, and then they will ask you also if you've got a psychologist that you want to go to, you give them their name. That gives you 6 sessions. Once those 6 sessions finish, you can get a letter from your psychologist to go back to your doctor to get an extra 6. You're entitled to, in every calendar year, up to 15 free sessions with your psychologist. Some psychs do charge a gap fee. So the Medicare usually will cover $124.50 or something like that. Some psychs charge $170, so there's like a $50 gap. Some don't charge anything on top, so it's just whatever Medicare gives. So obviously try and find somebody that suits your financial means.
Your Instagram feed, I think, is very important. With the feed on Instagram, who you follow.
Yes. So who you follow on any socials for that matter.
Any socials, yeah.
Unfollow people that make you feel like shit.
Yeah.
And follow more people that make you feel awesome and that make you feel like you just want to keep clicking their stuff and you can't wait to see their things. But yeah, that's just the process for just the mental health, just for anyone that wants to know more about stuff. You can also...
What about what you do? I think what you do is amazing.
I do? Yeah. So I do, I guess, coaching for people that have experienced some kind of trauma. I do one-on-ones, but not so often anymore. I'm happy to give out my work number online. It's 0423 236 003.
Say it one more time.
0423 236 003. You can call or message. I've also got Instagram.
Yep.
It's the.behavior.guy, I think. Or just Google Ibrahim Abdo. We can put up all that information.
I'll put up all the links to your socials.
All good.
And your number. As well, if you've gone through any form of sexual abuse in your family, and it was from someone who's much older than you and is a pedophile or whatnot, I most likely your cousins have gone through it too. So maybe just speak. First step, speak to.
It is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but the best thing you'll ever do.
The best, yeah.
Always. Just make sure that you're safe. And again, if you don't feel like you can, speak to family or friends or whoever, get that professional help.
Yeah.
Because it is confidential. They won't say anything to anybody. You don't know them. If you don't feel comfortable, you never have to go again. There is nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Yeah. So professional help, but also self-education when you do your own research and you read your own books, because sometimes you can't just rely on the psychologist.
Yeah, 100%.
You need to as well immerse yourself with all of that knowledge. Your environment, the people who are around you. Sometimes being around people who have such a closed mindset, you're constantly going to be in that mindset.
Yeah.
And you are who you hang out, you hang out with. You literally share the DNA. I have a really good friend of mine. She's a scientist, and she tells me like if I like now me and you, if we stay hanging out together, I literally pick up your cells and you pick up my cells, and they
start to merge.
They start to merge.
Right.
So you literally become who you're around. You know, what you follow on social media, that influences us massively. So make sure whoever you're following, you know, they have a positive impact on your life. And yeah, I wish you guys luck to this journey of healing and reaching your full potential and really just being the best version of yourself that you can be.
Absolutely. Like you said, it is a journey. It is not something we do once a week, once a fortnight. This is a lifestyle, and it is something that can be so rewarding, so difficult and so challenging, but absolutely rewarding when you're living authentically.
Yeah. Something that my best friend, when I was telling you about, he tells me he follows this lady called Joyce Meyer. Joyce Meyer, she's the first. I have to tell you about Joyce Meyer. What are the priests called? She's like a priest. She's a preacher.
Okay.
She's in her church. She was the first female preacher to preach. She has a massive following. Her father raped her whole childhood, but she has like millions of people who follow her, and she's done so well for herself, and she's changed so many people's lives. And being a woman, you know, I love something that he taught me that he got from her. Every level you go up in your life, new level, new devil. So you might go up a level, but God is going to send you harder challenges to overcome. But when you do overcome those challenges, you go up to the next level in your life. And obviously, every time you go up a level, it comes with its benefits, but it also comes with its challenges. 100%. So do not get discouraged. If you feel like, you know, you've just smashed out your goals and you're going to another level in your life and then something happens, that's part of the plan. That's what's meant to happen. You know, I constantly need to remind myself that something will go wrong in my life, and I'm like, new level, new devil. Okay, God, I love you. I know you're testing me. I know you're conditioning me to be stronger and better. And that's what life is. So,
awesome outlook.
Yeah. Always see the positive, no matter what you're going through.
Yeah. And those affirmations are so important.
Yeah.
Having something positive to tell yourself every single day.
Yeah, definitely. I am. The two most powerful words on earth is I am.
I have it. So one of my friends for my birthday got me this. It says, "I am enough and I have enough." Those were my affirmations. Yeah, because I am enough and I do have enough.
I love that. Yeah. You know, I am stemmed from Jesus Christ. Yeah, I've been reading a lot into the whole philosophy of Jesus and the I am, and I am through God, and so it's a very ancient kind of thing.
It's not brand new. None of this stuff is brand new. No. It's just we're not taught any of it.
No, we're not taught of it.
Yeah.
No. One of the books that I've read that I highly recommend for everybody to read is Think and Grow Rich. That book does a lot when it comes to about the power of thought and how you can manipulate your mind, and you know how it's either you control your mind or your mind controls you. Yeah. So it's a massive book for people to read. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. All right, thanks guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Shireen, for having me.
Thank you for coming.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I am honestly so thankful that you reached out to me.
No, man, don't be silly.
It's been an amazing experience, and I can't wait to see what comes of it.
I know, me too.